This is Mike Dilk of Relax Back UK.
This is UK Health Radio, your global real feel-good radio station. And thank you for joining me, Mike Dilk, with the Relax Back UK show. This week, pain control is a big issue for a lot of people. And here's something to help that is free, you don't need a prescription, it's legal, and also
it doesn't wear off in its effectiveness. It's sort of better than opiates in that sense. You don't keep needing a bigger and bigger dose.
Yeah, it is swearing. Dr. Emma Byrne is an artificial intelligence expert who's had a look at this, and that actually might just show how AI, artificial intelligence, might just creep into almost everything we do in the future, even swearing. And I think that's probably another show. On the same subject, we got lexicographer Jonathan Green, and that's hard to say, and what it means is he makes dictionaries. So after swearing, we got a chat about CBD oil with England International Rugby player George Kruis. He started a business where he supplies CBD oil.
Myself as a tested athlete, I've been tested 8 or 9 times this year for urine samples, hair samples, blood samples. So we've got a really stringent testing procedure, which I guess is great if for the sport, and therefore if we want to have a product which we can give to athletes.
So in the media recently, there have been a lot of reports that some CBD oils contain all sorts of things that you wouldn't expect. So George takes his own product, and he can't afford to be ingesting something that he doesn't know about, and we're getting banned from playing rugby. That's his career. That's what he does. So he takes this testing of his product extremely seriously. And we also look at what CBD oil actually does for you.
Relax Back UK is run by my daddy.
So, does swearing really control pain? Do worse words control pain more? What if you swear a lot anyway? Do you have to swear even worse to control the pain if you stub your toe? What about if you swear somewhere where you shouldn't or wouldn't normally? What about if you swear in church? Is the effect greater? These and other things are looked at by my next guests, and I started off by asking Dr. Emma Byrne exactly what her background was.
Well, my background originally is in artificial intelligence, but I moved into something called computational neuroscience, where we try to build systems models of how different parts of the brain work to understand how we might be processing information. And through that, I got very interested in the subject of pain, because the avoidance of pain and the desire for pleasure is largely what's driven our evolution, what's made us really smart.
Okay.
And it was through that study of pain that I got into this, the science of how swearing helps you tolerate pain.
And in fact, you wrote a book, Swearing is Good for You.
That's right. And I didn't actually set out to write Swearing is Good for You. At the time, I assumed that the research would be a lot more nuanced, that there would be some coverage of these, sort of obvious downsides, because we spend so long telling ourselves that swearing is a terrible thing. But actually, the science and the research was overwhelmingly positive. There are so many benefits.
Okay, right, we'll come on to some of the benefits in a moment. But first, let's just introduce the next guest, Jonathan.
Hi.
Hi, so you're a lexicographer.
Lexicographer.
Did I say that correctly?
Dictionary, just say dictionary writer. Much simpler.
Digital writer.
Dictionary writer.
Dictionary
Sorry,
writer.
It's my croaking throat.
Okay, so you're an expert on words.
Oh, I'm an expert on slang words. I've never ventured into the mainstream. I leave that to the Oxford English Dictionary.
Okay, but essentially, you guys have found that swearing can help us with pain.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the leader of the study, the primary investigator, is Dr. Richard Stevens of Keele. But Jonathan and I were on the panel to look at whether or not there were socially acceptable alternatives to swear words. And probably a couple of hundred were suggested. Some of them very similar to existing swear words, some of them just amusing, some of them frankly surreal. And it was Nurofen that paid for this research that allowed us to spend this time, I think an entire day, of sifting through these and coming up with a couple of socially acceptable alternatives that then...
Because the fact that swear words, as we all know them, kind of help with pain, that's very much known, anecdotally, already, isn't it? Because if I'm hammering something and I whack my thumb, the first thing I do generally is swear, and it helps. And I'm thinking back to, so my kids are relatively young. I can remember when they were born, we had NCT classes, and my wife and I actually practiced shouting and swearing in these classes to kind of help deal with the pain of childbirth. So kind of, what's the difference between what we all know anecdotally and what you guys have done?
So having this done in a lab setting where you can get rid of any potential extraneous influences, like, for example...
Like having a baby.
Like having a baby, for example, you know, that's a very, very joyful occasion, but also, yeah. I mean, I was very off-brand. I didn't swear at all during the birth of my daughter, but she was very long and thin with a narrow head, which I think is probably the secret to a pain-free childbirth, is to have a skinny kid. But yeah, the good thing about doing this in the lab is you can get rid of all of those extraneous variables. So Rich Stevens' design is ingenious and elegant. You take this iced water that you check is consistently at the same temperature, and you make sure that people's hands are consistently at room temperature. And there's a very clever way of doing that, which is to have them put their hands in room temperature water, because we can only really tell temperature as something that we have something to compare it to. We do this as a relative rather than an absolute scale.
Yeah.
And then you restrict them to just one neutral word, one swear word, and in this case, one of these new socially acceptable words, and see how long they can keep their hands in that iced water. And you can also ask them afterwards to rate that pain. And obviously this is a subjective measure, but you hope through many repeats you can get a fairly good picture of how strongly that pain impacted people.
Right, so what sort of difference did you get?
So you can tolerate pain for about a third as long again, and you report it being about a third less painful if you're swearing than if you're using either a standard neutral word or, unfortunately, than if you're using one of these new made-up words. The new made-up words are no more effective than the control group, the control words, unfortunately, and come nowhere near the effectiveness of swearing when it comes to helping us tolerate pain.
Really?
Yes, unfortunately so.
That is extraordinary.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that neurologically we could kind of predict, but obviously you have hypotheses and then you test them. So one of the reasons why I thought it might not be the case that we can just invent things no matter how good they sound is that swearing, we know, has a huge emotional impact in the brain. We know, for example, that...
So it's not just shouting, it's not just the release of really screaming.
Yeah, it's specific words, and those words are ones that we have a taboo about. And we know this because when people, for example, have strokes that completely devastate the left side of the brain, which robs them of most of their language, many of those patients will still be able to swear as long as there's very little damage on the right. So the places that usually process social cognition or emotional cognition are also highly responsible for our production of swearing. And we've seen this in various medical case studies. For example, a man who had a complete left hemispherectomy, and the researchers gave him a test where you show pictures of objects and people and ask the patient to try to name them. So it's a sort of prompted speech.
Just rewind a bit. What happened to this bloke?
So he had a left hemispherectomy. So the entire
what does that mean?
Left side of the brain. So if you imagine the dividing line that runs from front to back down the middle of your brain, you sort of see it looks like two halves of a walnut. Yeah. Because of a pre-existing illness, I believe a tumour, they had to take the entirety of the left side of the brain. So that left him with multiple problems, obviously, because, as you know, the left controls the right side of the body, but also it houses areas that are like Broca's and Wernicke's, which are very heavily involved in our production of speech. So it wasn't expected that he'd be able to be particularly articulate, but they wanted to see over time if he could restore any of his language. So you take a baseline, you show this person shortly after their the operation, you show them various pictures. And these pictures would be things like a watch or a clock or a cup or a chair. And you might throw in pictures of people as well. And this case study is beautifully written up. And they talk about how they'd shown him these various things. And they record in exquisite detail exactly how long he struggles to say the word table before giving up. And they record which sort of sounds he makes. And then they say, stimulus number 17 was a picture of Ronald Reagan, at which point the patient responded with a surprisingly fluent production of swear words. But they don't tell us which swear words. They've told us, how long he stutters over the letter F while trying to come up with the word watch. But they won't tell us what he said about Ronald Reagan. But it's that sort of thing that shows how differently swearing is processed in the brain and how emotionally, how well it fits with these many other parts of the brain that we use for this social and emotional cognition. And for some reason that is helping us with pain, but the exact mechanism as yet is not uncovered.
So do you think an individual might be able to sort of train themselves to kick off the same reaction that swearing might induce to deal with pain?
Well, you'd need two things. First of all, you need to be younger than me, because one of the things we know from swearing research, there's a fantastic researcher who has spent a long time looking at, she is a Turkish researcher, and she looks at Turkish American students, some of whom learnt American English before adolescence, and some of whom are bilingual but learnt their language much later. And those that learnt English before adolescence have the same emotional response to English swearing as they do to Turkish swearing, whereas those who learned it afterwards don't. So we know that if you're going to train yourself to think that something is a swear word, you have to do it quite early on. You have to do it probably before your mid-20s. So you might be fine, but I'm not.
Right. Well, actually, I was thinking sort of cut out the middle bit, cut out the swear word and go straight to the whatever it is that swearing turns on in the brain.
Well, that's the other thing, because it needs to be something that is socially and emotionally so stimulating, so the technical term being arousing, so not sexual arousal, but just the amount of energy that you're using in order to do this processing. It has to be something that feels socially risky, that has a taboo. So you would have to spend a lot of time convincing yourself that if other people heard you say this, that they would be shocked and horrified. Because that's the odd paradox about swearing. It's incredibly useful. We need it in our language, but we also need it to be this sort of sinister and dark side of our language. It needs to have this taboo. It needs to have this emotional resonance in our brains in order for it to be effective. And Rich Stevens has tried other studies with the kind of, they're called minced oaths sometimes, things like sugar, that are, we know what you're meant to say, but you're not really saying them. And they too just don't have the same impact as the real deal.
So what about if you're in a social environment where people swear a lot? So I'm just thinking, maybe you've looked at military, because in the military, there's a lot of swearing. And then if someone in the military gets hurt, which, let's face it, is quite possible, is there a whole new language that they use, or does the regular swearing just not have the same effect?
Well, that hasn't been studied in a military population, but I do know from the research out of Kiel that just because you swear a lot in your everyday life, that doesn't actually diminish the pain-killing effect of swearing. That there doesn't seem to be any sort of dose effect. It doesn't wear off in its effectiveness. It's sort of better than opiates in that sense. You don't keep needing a bigger and bigger dose. But certainly, when it comes to populations like the military, or when you are watching or taking part in sports, or even for myself, like I said, my background is in artificial intelligence. I've worked in very male-dominated industries, and certainly for most of my time working there, it's changing a bit now, but swearing was definitely part of the camaraderie, and it showed that, you were expressing your frustrations, or you're expressing your admiration even sometimes, but that doing so in a way that had a slight social risk to it, and you were saying, I trust you, that you trust me enough not to get offended by what I'm saying.
Sure.
And so we did some research on football fans on Twitter and found, shock, surprise, they swear. Of course they do. But also what we did find was that they're much more likely to swear in surprise and joy and even sympathy than they are to be aggressive. That aggressive swearing actually made up very little swearing on Twitter among football fans. And the only time that we ever saw any fans swearing about a player from the opposite team was a time when someone had done a particularly awful tackle and was given a red card and was out for the rest of the season, deservedly. And both his own team's fans and the opposing team's fans were calling him all manner of names for his terrible behaviour. But most of the time, it's a way of expressing either excitement, so F yeah, or it's a way of expressing solidarity with your fellow fans about what an effing essy season you're having. And we found that you can tell, even without watching a game, the ratio between, we called it the Phi Sigma ratio to get it through publication, but the ratio between the F word and the S word would tell you whether or not something good had happened or something bad had happened, because F is used for any kind of heightened emotion, whereas the S word is only used when things are going terribly wrong.
So as far as controlling pain then, does that mean that if you're either at church or at a football match, the same word has the same effect for controlling pain, or not? I got a bit lost then.
That's a really interesting question. So if you're using that, so one of the things that Rich Stevens has done is to hold the social conditions constant throughout these experiments. It would be very interesting to see whether or not you could do a social manipulation. So telling people that they were in a circumstance where they couldn't swear. But I think that that's likely to be highly personal. And the reason that I say that is that if you study those few patients with Tourette's who also, whose part of their symptoms is coprolalia, which is only, I think, about 25%, maybe less, of Tourette's patients actually suffer from
Just tell us quickly what that is.
Oh, so coprolalia is the use of taboo language.
Right.
It literally means, I don't know if you can beep this or not, but it literally means excrement talking. There we go. And those few Tourette's patients who actually suffer from coprolalia, if you tell them that they cannot swear, for some, they do quite well. They suppress that swearing, but they report a high amount of stress. For others, actually just the stress in and of itself is enough to make them swear more.
Okay.
So there is this complex cascade of reactions between the feelings of stress, the feelings of inappropriateness, the strength of the taboo, and whether or not we're then likely to be able to either deliberately produce or actually just stop ourselves from swearing. The amygdala plays a huge role in saying either stop or go to swearing. Right. So for some of us, swearing in church would, even without suffering from Tourette's, could almost become a compulsion just because of how much you're not meant to.
Okay. So I suppose in this brief chat, what we've discovered is that there are many variables, and actually this is pretty complicated. But looking towards the future, how is this going to help people who are in pain, some in constant pain? Their life is ruined because they're in constant pain. Is this going to help them at some point?
Yeah, so there are some really good studies looking at people with cancer and people with arthritis and their use of strong language. And quite sadly, we found that some of this is quite gendered. So when men who have suffered from testicular cancer talk about their feelings, if they use swear words there was a study that used video diaries. Those that use swear words, those that allowed themselves to express themselves fully emotionally, then reported that they were dealing with their situation in a way that was much better, much more positive. They felt more optimistic than those who were trying very hard not to release those emotional feelings. Whereas when you do a similar study with women with breast cancer or arthritis, they found that those women who swore more tended to feel better in and of themselves, but also to report that they started to lose their friends very rapidly. And because of our expectation that women don't swear, which flies in the face of the data that shows that actually we swear just as much as men, you can end up sacrificing your social support. So my advice would be, if you have a friend who is going through chronic pain or a life-altering illness, to be aware that their swearing is not an attempt to hurt you or to be aggressive or to try to alienate you. This is a way of allowing them to process their feelings, and to listen without judgment to that is one of the kindest things that you can do.
Goodness me. So I suppose if you are in pain, let it out. If you feel you can and you're not in church, just do it. Does it have the same effect if you're on your own?
That's very interesting.
I swear when I'm on my own if I stub my toe.
So I don't believe that Richard Stevens has done this where he's left people in the room on their own. I think he's present throughout, but there doesn't seem to be an audience effect. You don't seem to need an audience in order for it to work. But whether or not audiences tend to increase or decrease the efficacy of swearing, that's still an open question. And I can imagine some interesting studies of that, you know, sort of whether or not you are told that people are listening versus not, and how that makes you feel.
And who they are, if it's a load of nuns or a load of football supporters.
Exactly. So a little earlier I was doing an interview and I didn't realise that the producers and various other colleagues could hear what I was saying. And the interviewer had asked me to use a few choice words so she could inventively bleep them afterwards. And I think I was much less sort of hamstrung, believing that I was just talking to her, that I had a really good sense of who my audience was. Okay. And then discovering afterwards that more people had overheard me, there was that sort of almost delayed effect of slight embarrassment or shame of going, oh no, these people heard me swearing, even though I know that that's what we're here to discuss today.
So, sorry, I just cut you off a little bit, but in all this chat, we haven't brought in Jonathan very much, so perhaps I just can, now we're getting towards the end, but can give us any information on, you said it's the strength of swear words and the social acceptability of swear words. Does that change from which part of the country you're from or what you do as a job, or is that pretty standard?
I'm afraid, I mean, having arrived finally, I have no answer to that. I deal in slang rather than jargon, rather than dialect, so I cannot help. One thing though, as somebody who does actually suffer from quite a lot of pain, 8 screws in my spine, whatever, I've noticed that this works, the swearing, which I would suggest only works with the traditional, well-established taboo terms, the F word being the obvious one. Right. But a sharp response in using such a word is very good with a sharp pain. With chronic pain, it doesn't, however many times you repeat it, I would suggest that it is less efficacious.
Okay, so
but I've done no research on this other than the privacy of my own room.
Yes, okay. So if suffering from long-term pain, it might not be quite so useful.
Doesn't seem to make any difference at all.
Right. Well, I've got to say, this whole subject is absolutely fascinating. So if people are listening to this and they would like to find out a little bit more, presumably one way of doing that is reading your book, Dr. Byrne, Swearing is Good for You. But in general speaking, are there any websites or useful resources?
Certainly having a look at Dr. Stevens' pages at Keele University, that will give you the latest details on all of the research that was done, both as this particular study, but also as that's unfolding.
Is that publicly available?
It is, yes. So if you go to Keele University, keele.ac.uk, and look for Dr. Richard Stevens, you will find his department there.
Excellent. I will try and put a link to that on my website.
Fantastic.
So I think the best thing to do now is, just because we're running short of time, thank you so much to both of you for just chatting about that. I've got a feeling that we're going to come back to this topic because I think it's absolutely fascinating. I find it interesting for one. So, guys, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you.
Relax Back UK is run by my daddy.
Brilliant. I really do love doing this show. I get to talk to some fantastic people. And the next guest is no exception. George Kruis is an England International Rugby player. And we talk about his company 45 CBD. We'll hear from him shortly. In the meantime, I have entered a competition. This show, the Relax Back UK show, is entered into the Janie Lee Grace 2019 Platinum Awards. And if you like the show, and you want to help me to continue to do a little more, please do vote for me. And the way to do that is to go to the website janieleegrace.com/readers-votes. I'm going to spell that for you. JANEYLEEGRACE.com/readers-votes. And when you're on the website, put in the Relax Back UK show as your nomination. Right, thank you very much indeed for doing that.
UK is run by my daddy.
There was a landmark decision in November 2018 to allow UK doctors to prescribe cannabis under very limited circumstances, and these were inspired by cases of two patients, Billy Caldwell and Alfie Dingley, and their epilepsy got a lot better using medicinal cannabis, and that was with medicine that contained both THC and CBD. And we'll talk about what those stand for shortly. However, those medicines, I think, are still proving quite hard to get hold of. Now, research is happening in other areas, other aspects to show where CBD oil is of use. I'm not sure if there are large-scale trials with people to really get to grips with it. If there are, and you know about them, please do contact me, because I would love to hear from you. What there is there's a lot of anecdotal info and stories of how CBD oil is helping people. Now, England Rugby International George Kruis has set up a company called it's called 45 CBD, and I spoke to him about his company and CBD oil. And when I started, I just asked him to introduce himself.
Well, thank you very much. So, yes, as you said, my name's George Kruis. I'm 29. Sounds like a start of Alcohol's Anonymous. But I'm a rugby player. Played for Saracens, RFC, in North London. Also played for England, and I, along with my teammate at Saracens, Dom Day, have started 45 CBD.
Okay, right. So I like to go out of my way to chat to people at the top of the game. So I think we've ascertained you're at the top here. So let me ask, 45 CBD. All right, that's an interesting name. Why the name?
It's just got a small connotation to our positions on the field. So both me and Dom Day are positions 4 and 5 respectively. So
right.
Yeah. So when we pack down in the scrum, we're 4 and 5 from above.
Right. So you're close to each other on the pitch, and hopefully close to each other in business as well.
Yeah, exactly that.
Fantastic. All right. So what does your business do?
So we sell CBD oil. It's pretty much aimed towards an active and sporty person. And that's the basics of our business.
Okay. So what CBD oil? It's hard to say. CBD oil is from the cannabis plant. Yeah. So does it make you high?
Well, I think the first thing to say, it doesn't make you high. There's our CBD oil has been extracted from hemp, which is very low in THC. THC is the aspect that gives you the psychoactive. It gives
I'm going to be really mean now. I'm going to ask you to say what THC stands for.
That is me. It's tetra something that I should really know.
I've written it down. I'm going to try and pronounce it. Tetrahydrocannabinoid oil.
Yes.
All right. Well done. Okay. It's quite a mouthful. And CBD stands for
cannabinoid,
which is a lot easier, and that's what your product contains. So thankfully that's a lot easier to say.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make you high. It's legal.
Yeah.
What does it do for you?
So we're very as a food supplement company. We are very kind of strict and in terms of what we are allowed to say. We're not allowed to make any medical claims, but we can talk about it, maintaining and supporting an active lifestyle. For us, we see it as more of like a food supplement. So something like your vitamin C's, you're something that you can take daily. And CBD reacts with your endocannabinoid system, which is your ENS system, which is within your body. Obviously, CBD being a cannabinoid, is part of your endocannabinoid system. So,
what does that do for you? That system that I won't try to pronounce.
It controls a lot of different things, really. From your nervous system to immune to basically regulating and balancing your body, and that's where you kind of see CBD fitting in as a supplement to to supplement that system as itself.
Okay. And you yourself have found that useful during your playing career?
Yeah, for sure. I've had a lot of highs and lows in our sport, it's definitely helped some of my symptoms are out the way. Something I take it for quite regularly is to kind of give myself a calmness, especially in the evenings, and I believe that helps promote my sleep. But there's lots of people taking it for a number of different reasons. Like I said, we can't make medical claims, but there's lots of people, taking it for a number of different symptoms that they're trying to suppress. Really.
Right. And so, presumably, playing rugby, you get whacked. You mentioned before we started chatting that you've had, was it 8 operations?
Yeah, I've had 8 operations. I'm just coming over the back of an ankle operation on my right ankle, and yeah, I've definitely been using it in that space, and I'm a believer, really.
Yeah. Okay. Does it help you recover, or just help you sleep, or when you're recovering from operations, or what do you use it for?
Yeah, look, like I said, it's a touchy subject. I use it for some of the symptoms that I need to overcome. But like I said, we just want to supply a 100% natural alternative to some different things that are out there.
Okay, so anecdotally, there's lots of people who say it works for them, does good things for them, helps them sleep, helps reduce anxiety. Actually, is there anything else anecdotally that people say it works for?
Pain management is quite a big one. I think a lot of our customers are kind of middle-aged with maybe sore fingers and joints and things like that. So that's when we've done questionnaires.
Sounds like me, actually.
Middle-aged, you're giving no, and that's when we've done questionnaires and things like that. That's what the majority of the feedback's for. So so yeah, it's an interesting spread of people across different walks of life, really.
Right. And I did look online before chatting to see if the medical work that's been done, and there is work being done on it. Are you aware of any sort of human trials?
Yeah, the biggest thing for us is anecdotally, it really is fascinating to see what people are saying about the product, and I think we've got a nice insight where we get messages daily from people who are saying this is great and saying what it's helped them with and things like that. That's not necessarily that's not publicly, that's private messages, and that's where I think you can get the most kind of backing from it. I think with the in the increase of different countries having legalization of cannabis as a whole, there's massive amounts of studies coming in. Obviously, CBD's starting to boom at the moment in terms of lots of different products and in different countries as well. So for us, it's massively exciting to see these lots of studies coming through at the moment, which will go a long way to back up a lot of the anecdotal studies and a lot of the anecdotal feedback at the moment. So it's an exciting time. It's something that we properly relish. It's something that we've been looking forward to, because we believe it will back up what a lot of people have said, but because of the laws in the last 100 years on cannabis and hemp, that I think it's incredibly hard to get medical trials on a banned substance, and that's something that is now opening up in places like Canada, large states in America, and with that follows extensive research, but research takes time, so it's. Yeah.
All right. Well, watch this space. We will watch this space. So, for you guys, where does your CBD oil come from?
So we get it from Europe, across Europe, in 3 different places, and we get the raws sent over in a kind of basically like tubs of it, which is comes over in really thick honey, and yeah, we get that. Then we mix it up with MCT oil for our oils, which is coconut oil. But yeah, I think the nice thing is that we know exactly where the products come from. We get it tested there. We get it tested as it arrives, and then we test it as it leaves. So for us, it's something that we're pretty keen about knowing, kind of seed to shelf, how it's come from.
Yeah, I was keen to ask you about that, because just recently, actually, there's been some stuff in the media about the Centre for Medical Cannabis. Actually, I must admit, I'm not exactly sure what that is. But anyway, the Centre for Medical Cannabis tested 30 products and have found that nearly half of them contain THCs. So in theory, that's illegal in the UK. And then others of them actually had very small amounts of CBD oil, and actually one didn't have any at all. So you kind of make sure you're not in this camp, don't you? How do you do that?
Look, from our point of view, I guess we sell two types. We sell full spectrum, which has trace amounts of THC, which is up to 0.2 is legal within the UK. But we also sell a zero THC product, which is 100% zero THC. But we massively embrace testing. I think there has to be a lot more around kind of regulation and standards. I think at the moment it's not where it should be.
What is it? You don't actually have to get this stuff tested if you're selling it. Is that correct? I mean, you do.
Yeah, there are a lot of people who won't have third-party lab testing on their websites. I think as a customer, if you're a customer thinking of having it or trying it, then go to a website that has their batch certificates on their website that make sure they're third-party lab tested, so from a company that's not part of their company.
So tell us a bit about your testing regime. How does it work?
So for our zero THC, which we've got tested by a company called BSCG, which is Banned Substance Control Group. And we went down that route. It cost a lot of money and also took a fair bit of time to go over to America to make sure that was fully set up. And we did that because myself as a tested athlete, I've been tested 8 or 9 times this year for urine samples, hair samples, blood samples. So we've got a really stringent testing procedure, which I guess is great if for the sport, and therefore if we want to have a product which we can give to athletes, then also it's got to be fully tested up to the max. So
bottom line is, if you're taking your product and it doesn't pass the test, you'll be banned from playing rugby.
Yes, exactly. So we've got a lot of you've got a lot
riding on this.
Riding on it, and that's why we've gone to the extra lengths of making sure that we've had it third party tested by 2 different people, and then also on top of that batch tested for over 400 banned substances, which it could be steroids or anything like that, which athletes like myself can't take. So we've put some time into it.
Good. All right, I suspect the listeners will be very happy to know that. So how is your product taken?
It's taken in a number of different ways, but we've got capsules, we've got oils, which you, like a tincture, you'll drop it under your tongue, leave it for 60 seconds to absorb, and then you can swallow. And
this stuff's pretty bitter. It tastes horrible, doesn't it?
We've actually got an orange product as well.
Okay, right. So you've tried to get over the horrible taste.
Yeah. But our natural isn't as bitter as some, and we're quite happy about that. But yeah, it can taste for those who haven't tasted it. It can taste quite earthy, quite wholesome. And then our orange obviously tastes like orange.
Right. Okay. And you got creams as well.
Yeah, we've got a balm which you can rub on and go from there.
All right. And so is the idea that if you've got a bad ankle or a bad knee or something, that's where you rub it on.
Yeah, but personally, I think you see a lot of people take the oils and the capsules for that sort of stuff. I think for skin irritations and bits like that.
So it's more for skin irritations than the joint where you're rubbing it in, is it?
Yeah, I mean, people do use it for the joints and irritations like that. But personally, I'd prefer the oil.
Right. Okay. Very good. There's a big problem, certainly in the States, and it's just starting to come into the UK, with people getting addicted to some opiates that they take for pain and what have you, because after a while they stop working, and then people try and up the dose to try and make it work. Yeah. Is there any work or any knowledge about CBD oil and it sort of after a while stopping to have an effect?
I guess there are 2 separate subjects there. That the opioid one is is something that is massively in the press at the moment. I guess
people get addicted. It's serious stuff.
Yeah, that's there's been some massive studies and massive kind of documentaries into looking into the addictions and things like that, which is very eye opening. But in terms of CBD, it's got a very very good safety profile, and that's that's something that's very well known. And it's not addictive because you've taken out different aspects of it, but it's like I said, it's got a good safety profile, and it's something that is 100% natural. Ours is vegan, vegetarian friendly.
All right, so you cover those aspects. That's good.
We don't use herbicides and pesticides, so for us it's just offering alternatives to different things that is part of, I think, the growing trend of people at the moment. We want more natural products. They want to know what's actually in their product, and I think that's something we're.
So it's not addictive. Are there any side effects that are known of?
People can people's feedback, they feel in a calmer state. That to me, that it doesn't make me sleepy, but it puts me in a calmer state. But that's feedback that we've heard.
But no negative side effects.
There's nothing negative that I've come across or we've had any feedback from so far. So just the taste, really, I think is some people's sticking point.
All right. Do your teammates use it?
Yeah, we've got as part of our BSCG batch tested product, our zero THC.
Hang on,
BSCG, so that's the Banned Substance Control Group we were talking about earlier. We've now got over 300 and maybe 325 professional athletes using it. So that's from rugby players. I think we've got 100 or so professional rugby players using it, all the way through to yoga people, but to Olympians are using it. So it's something which
the rugby players get a discount then.
They do, yes, they do. But so yes, if you subscribe, you also get a discount as well. So, but I think that the good thing is that there's a lot of people in professional sport that are looking for different forms of recovery, different forms of of pushing the boundary of what's legal, and I think this just comes into a food supplement regime that can help.
But I mean, recovery is really important now, because as a professional rugby player, how many times a week are you playing?
Yeah, exactly. We play once, and then we probably recover till Tuesday. You're still sore from Saturday till Tuesday, and then you ramp it up again. So, yeah, recovery is a huge thing, especially if you're playing 30 or 35 games a year. It can get quite on top of you. And
it's all sports as well. I was just thinking of Wimbledon. These guys played a number of matches in 2 weeks, all at top level. The body needs a bit of help. Yeah, for sure. I think it's and that's something that's grown massively, especially from what I've seen in the last 10 years in professional sport. People, there's machines and tools and supplements for everything, which is exciting. It gets the players back on the field quicker and in a better state. Right. So if people are listening to this and think, right, I'd like to find out a bit more, see if something like this can help me. Yeah. What can they look at? Is there a website you can sort of direct people to, and also what's your website? Yeah, for sure. Look, our website is www.45cbd.co.uk. That's spelt 45. And then on our social handles on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, we have at 45cbd, which is also spelt 45cbd. And that's where you can find us. There's plenty of information online as well from other sources. If you type in CBD, there's plenty of blogs and things like that. We've got a blog on our website which can help out any questions and FAQs as well. All right, excellent. All right, well, look, thank you very much indeed for chatting. Interesting stuff. Oh, thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you very much to my guests on the show this week, and they were Dr. Emma Byrne, otherwise known as the Sweary Scientist, Jonathan Green, an expert on slang, and international rugby player George Kruis, talking about CBD oil. And of course, thank you to you for listening.
That was Mike Dilk of Relax Back UK. Thank you for listening, and please join us again next time.